For the first time, a chilling look inside the off-campus home where the 4 University of Idaho students were killed in 2022. The house frozen in time, signs of a party, dishes still in the sink. These newly released crime scene photos, some blurred by police, reveal both a typical college life and the horrifying signs of struggle.
It was a chilly November night in 2022. The small college town of Moscow, Idaho, slept under a blanket of fog. The streets were quiet, the lights of sorority houses dimmed, and the last of the weekend parties had faded into silence. But inside one house, at 1122 King Road, something unthinkable was happening. Something that would send shockwaves across America and haunt an entire community. Before the tragedy that shook Moscow, Idaho, there were just 4 young people, living, studying, laughing, and dreaming like millions of college students do every day. They weren't just names in a headline. They were friends, roommates, and family. The heartbeat of a tight-knit group who shared everything from late-night snacks to future plans. In their cozy home on King Road, life was ordinary, warm, messy, and full of laughter. Madison Mogen was the glue that held their circle together. At 21, she had the kind of energy that could light up a room. Friends described her as confident, witty, and always ready to make others laugh. Born and raised in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, Maddie had spent most of her life in the Pacific Northwest. She was studying marketing at the University of Idaho, but her heart belonged to creative expression, music, photography, and travel. Those who knew her said she had a spark, the kind that draws people in. She was spontaneous yet grounded, someone who made ordinary days feel special. Her best friend, Kaylee, had known her since middle school. They were inseparable, 2 halves of the same story. Kaylee Goncalves was 21, vibrant, ambitious, and always pushing forward. Her family described her as fearless and fiercely independent. She was the kind of friend who always encouraged others to dream big, and she led by example. After years of hard work, she was graduating early with a degree in general studies and had just accepted a new job in Austin, Texas. Kaylee had bought a car, planned her move, and adopted a golden doodle puppy named Murphy, a small bundle of joy who rarely left her side. But that final weekend in Moscow, Kaylee had returned one last time to visit Maddie and celebrate her future before the big move. It was meant to be a joyful reunion, one last girls' night in the home they'd shared so many memories in. 20-year-old Xana Kernodle was known for her humor and kindness. She was majoring in marketing and working part-time at a local restaurant to support herself. Xana had a way of lifting people's moods. Her friends called her the social butterfly of the house. She loved to dance, decorate, and make people feel included. Her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, had been a constant presence in her life. The two were nearly inseparable. They met during college and quickly became one of those couples everyone admired. Easygoing, playful, and always smiling. In photos, Xana's eyes are full of life, the kind of person who finds beauty in small moments, laughter, friendship, and late-night conversations. Ethan Chapin was 20 years old, a triplet, one of 3 siblings who shared a deep bond. His family described him as joyful, adventurous, and full of love. He was a member of the Sigma Chi fraternity, studying recreation, sport, and tourism management. Ethan loved sports, the outdoors, and being around people. His friends say he was the kind of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and walk out with 10 new friends. He and Xana's relationship had grown stronger over time. They often spent weekends together, going to games, parties, or simply watching movies on the couch. On the night of November 12th, they had attended a fraternity party, one of countless carefree nights shared before life would change forever. Together, these 4 young people built a small world inside that King Road house. It wasn't perfect. No college house ever is. but it was full of life. Friends dropped by unannounced. Music drifted from speakers late into the night. Pizza boxes piled up in the kitchen, and laughter echoed through the hallways. In many ways, their friendship symbolized the best of college life. Freedom, discovery, belonging. They were young adults just beginning to step into their futures, shaping who they were meant to become. No one could have imagined that within days, their laughter would fall silent, and their names would echo through headlines across the world. In the quiet days before November 13th, 2022, life at 1122 King Road was beautifully ordinary. A house filled with dreams, friendship, and laughter. The kind of moments you never think will be your last. When the morning came, and police arrived at that same house, nothing would ever be the same again. The house at 1122 King Road stood quietly on a hill, a modest three-story home surrounded by tall trees and narrow gravel roads. From the outside, it looked like any other college rental. Paint slightly faded, porch lights glowing softly at night, cars parked out front. But inside, it was the center of so many lives, a gathering spot for friends, parties, and study nights. It was the kind of house that always had people coming and going, where music mixed with laughter, and where you could always find someone awake, no matter the hour. The house itself was unusual, built on a slope, with entrances on both the second and third floors. Inside, 3 levels connected by narrow staircases. The bottom floor housed 2 roommates who often kept to themselves. The middle floor was home to Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin, who often stayed over. And on the top floor, Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogen shared a cozy space filled with photos, string lights, and the kind of warmth only close friends can create. It was a Saturday night, November 12th, 2022. A normal weekend for college students. The air in Moscow was cold but clear, and the small college town buzzed with weekend energy. Bars and late-night food trucks were busy. Music echoed faintly through campus streets. Inside the King Road home, the group had separate plans, unaware that these moments would be their last. At around 10 p.m., Madison Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves left the house together to visit a popular downtown bar called the Corner Club. Security cameras later captured them smiling, chatting, enjoying their night. Nothing out of the ordinary. They spent several hours with friends, laughing and taking photos. Around 1:30 a.m., the two stopped by a local food truck, Grub Truckers, a well-known late-night spot for students. A live stream from the truck's webcam later showed them waiting for food, talking casually, and then leaving with a man nearby, a friend who helped them get home safely. By 1:56 a.m., they were back at 1122 King Road. The lights were still on. The house felt peaceful. That same evening, Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin had attended a Sigma Chi fraternity party, just a short walk away. Friends recalled seeing them laughing, dancing, and having a good time. They stayed until around 1:45 a.m. before returning to Xana's room on the second floor. Phone records and deliveries later confirmed that around 4 a.m., Xana was still awake, having ordered food shortly before the attack occurred. Small details like that would later become crucial in piecing together the timeline. By 2 a.m., the town had fallen quiet. Most students were asleep. At the King Road home, the lights flickered off one by one. Downstairs, the 2 surviving roommates, who lived on the bottom floor, had returned home earlier that night. They'd locked their doors and gone to bed. Upstairs, Kaylee's dog Murphy curled up near the bed as the girls fell asleep. Xana and Ethan settled into their room 1 floor below. The night was calm. No one in that house, or the town, could have sensed the danger that was coming. Investigators believe the killer entered the home sometime between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting the door may have been left unlocked, a common habit in the quiet college neighborhood. From this moment onward, the house that had been full of life and laughter became a silent witness to unimaginable horror. Inside, 4 lives were taken, each brutally, each without warning. The two surviving roommates remained asleep through most of it, until one woke up to strange noises, crying, whispers, footsteps. But in those brief, confusing moments, no one truly understood what was happening upstairs. By morning, the house was still. Phones buzzed unanswered. The world outside continued on as normal. Coffee shops opened, students went to class, families made breakfast. But inside 1122 King Road, time had stopped. It wasn't until noon, when one of the surviving roommates called friends to come over, that the horror was discovered. When police arrived minutes later, they found what would become one of the most shocking crime scenes in modern American history. The morning of November 13th, 2022, began like any other Sunday in Moscow, Idaho. A thin layer of frost covered the lawns. Church bells echoed faintly through the quiet air. The streets were empty, peaceful. But at the small gray house on King Road, the world was about to change forever. By late morning, messages started going unanswered. Friends were texting, calling, but no one inside the King Road home was replying. One of the surviving roommates, still unaware of the horror upstairs, had woken up. She noticed the door to Xana's room was slightly open. Quiet. Still. Soon after, she called friends to come over, thinking something might be wrong. Maybe someone had passed out. Maybe an accident. But what those friends would walk into was something no one could have prepared for. At 11:58 a.m., a call was made to 911 from inside the home. The report was brief, but urgent. An unconscious person. When officers from the Moscow Police Department arrived, they expected a routine welfare check. What they found inside would haunt even the most seasoned investigators. As they entered through the second-floor door, it became clear. This wasn't a medical emergency. It was a massacre. Inside, the scene was devastating. In their bedrooms, Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin were found brutally attacked. The surviving roommates remained physically unharmed, but in shock. What had happened inside that house in just a few minutes defied understanding. No signs of forced entry, no gunshots, and no clear motive. Only silence, and the echo of a life violently interrupted. Within hours, the quiet town of Moscow was transformed. Yellow police tape surrounded King Road. Patrol cars lined the narrow street. News vans began to arrive. The University of Idaho campus, normally filled with chatter and laughter, fell silent. Students hugged each other, cried, and wondered. Who could have done this? At first, confusion spread. Police released little information, only confirming that 4 students were dead, and that there was no ongoing threat to the community. But that statement only deepened fear. How could there be no threat when a killer was still out there? Rumors began to swirl across social media. Students fled home early for Thanksgiving break. Locals locked their doors at night, something few had ever done in this small town. Detectives and crime scene technicians worked around the clock. The house was sealed, and evidence was meticulously collected: fingerprints, footprints, DNA samples, and thousands of photographs. Every inch of the home became part of the puzzle. Investigators began tracking the victims' movements that night. Security footage, phone pings, witness statements, piecing together their final hours. But still, there were no suspects, no murder weapon, no motive. The silence from police only fueled speculation. While detectives searched for answers, the town grieved. Thousands attended candlelight vigils, their faces lit by flickering flames, their voices trembling with prayers and disbelief. Photos of Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan were placed beside flowers and handwritten notes. The University of Idaho flag flew at half-staff. Professors cried in classrooms. Students described a campus that no longer felt the same. As national media descended, the small town of Moscow became the center of worldwide attention. Reporters stood in front of police tape. Talk shows speculated endlessly. Online sleuths dissected every frame of surveillance footage. Everyone wanted answers. But official updates were slow, sometimes weeks apart. The mystery of the Idaho 4 wasn't just a crime story anymore. It was a nationwide obsession. By late November, small details began to emerge. Detectives released surveillance footage of a white Hyundai Elantra seen near the King Road home around the time of the murders. They urged the public to help identify the owner. At first, it seemed like a minor lead, but in reality, it was the first thread in a web that would soon unravel everything. As days turned into weeks, grief turned into resolve. The families demanded justice. The community refused to let the victims be forgotten. Posters of the four friends lined storefronts and lampposts. In the midst of heartbreak, Moscow united, waiting for the day when the truth would finally come to light. For weeks, the murders of Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan seemed to have no face, no suspect, no motive, no answers. But deep inside the Moscow Police Department and the FBI's regional field office, investigators were following a trail few knew existed. A trail that began with a car and ended with a single strand of DNA. On December 7th, 2022, investigators made a public appeal. They were looking for the driver of a white 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra, spotted near the crime scene between 3 and 4 a.m. Thousands of tips poured in. Some were dead ends, others barely credible. But one stood out. A vehicle registered to a graduate student living just 10 miles away at Washington State University in Pullman. His name? Bryan Christopher Kohberger. At 28 years old, Bryan Kohberger was studying for a PhD in criminology and criminal justice. He wasn't just another student. He was obsessed with understanding the criminal mind. Professors said he was quiet, analytical, and intense. Classmates recalled how he would dominate discussions about serial offenders, forensic psychology, and crime scene behavior. In one chilling online survey, discovered later by investigators, Kohberger had asked convicted criminals to describe their feelings before, during, and after committing their crimes. What they were thinking, how they planned, how they escaped. It was a research project, but in hindsight, it read like something darker. After identifying Kohberger's car, investigators began digging deeper. They pulled his cell phone records, his university parking data, and his license plate scans. Soon, a pattern emerged. His phone had pinged near the victim's house multiple times in the weeks before the murders, as if he had been watching, studying, waiting. And then, on the night of November 13th, between 2:47 and 4:48 a.m., his phone went dark. Turned off completely. Only to reconnect on a highway heading back toward Pullman just minutes after the killings were believed to have occurred. But what sealed the case wasn't technology. It was science. At the crime scene, investigators had found a tan leather knife sheath, partially hidden beneath Madison Mogen's body. On the metal button of that sheath was a tiny sample of male DNA. For weeks, analysts ran it through databases with no direct hit. Then, the FBI used a new forensic tool, genetic genealogy, the same method that solved the Golden State Killer case. They traced the DNA back through family trees, eventually matching it to a sample collected from trash outside a Pennsylvania home. belonging to Bryan Kohberger's father. When lab results came back, the probability of the DNA belonging to anyone other than Kohberger was 1 in 5.37 octillion. By mid-December, Kohberger had finished his semester and planned to drive home to Pennsylvania with his father for winter break. The FBI shadowed him the entire way, nearly 2,400 miles, across 7 states. In body cam footage later released, Indiana police pulled him over twice for minor traffic stops, apparently part of the surveillance operation. Kohberger appeared calm, polite, even chatty. He showed no sign of the storm closing in. At 1:30 a.m., December 30th, 2022, the stillness of a Pennsylvania neighborhood was shattered. A SWAT team surrounded the Kohberger family home in Albrightsville. Moments later, Bryan Kohberger was taken into custody, barefoot, wearing a black t-shirt and shorts. Inside his car and home, police found gloves, computers, and other potential evidence. He was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. For the families of the victims, it was the first glimmer of justice after 47 agonizing days. Kohberger waived extradition and was flown back to Idaho under heavy security. When he appeared in court for the first time in January 2023, the world finally saw the man accused of killing 4 young students. He looked calm, expressionless, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, flanked by guards. As the charges were read aloud, the families sat just feet away, their faces filled with grief, disbelief, and resolve. In the following weeks, court documents, known as the Affidavit of Probable Cause, revealed chilling details. The surviving roommate had told police she'd seen a tall, masked man dressed in black walking through the house that night, leaving through the sliding glass door. Cell tower data, car movements, and DNA all pointed toward Kohberger. Investigators even recovered surveillance footage showing his car circling the neighborhood multiple times before and after the murders. It was an overwhelming web of evidence, though Kohberger maintained his innocence. The arrest shocked the nation. How could a man studying criminal justice, a man who supposedly wanted to understand killers, become one himself? Was it obsession? Arrogance? A desire to test his own theories? No one truly knew. But the contrast between who he appeared to be and what he was accused of stunned everyone who had met him. Classmates described him as awkward, but brilliant. Neighbors said he was quiet and polite. Yet behind that quiet exterior, investigators believed, was a darkness meticulously planned. As 2023 unfolded, the story entered the courts. Kohberger's defense claimed he was wrongly accused, that DNA transfer or investigative error might explain the evidence. But for the families of Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan, the wait for trial felt endless. Every delay, every motion, every headline, reopened wounds that hadn't healed. The small town of Moscow remained under the long shadow of that November night. The arrest of Bryan Kohberger brought a wave of relief, but also a deeper sense of heartbreak. For the families of Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan, nothing could truly bring their children back. The relief was mixed with disbelief that the man accused of taking so much away looked so ordinary. As he stood in court, silent and expressionless, the small town of Moscow watched from afar, waiting for the justice system to speak for the 4 voices that could not. The legal process would be slow and deliberate. Bryan Kohberger was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. He waived his right to a speedy trial, and his defense prepared for one of the most closely watched cases in recent history. Prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty, citing the heinous, atrocious, and cruel nature of the crimes. But beyond the courtroom, a heavier question lingered. Why? No one could fully understand what drove a criminology student, someone who studied criminal behavior, to allegedly commit such a horrific act. For the victims' families, healing became a daily battle. They launched scholarships, memorial funds, and tributes in honor of their children, each initiative reflecting their spirit and dreams. The Kaylee Goncalves Foundation began advocating for victims of violent crime. Ethan's family partnered with the Sigma Chi fraternity to fund educational projects. Xana's family supported awareness for campus safety. Madison's loved ones created a memorial scholarship for young women pursuing creative careers. Their mission was clear: The story of the Idaho 4 would not end in tragedy. It would live on as a legacy of strength, community, and remembrance. In the months following the tragedy, universities across the country reassessed campus safety. Conversations about personal security, mental health, and awareness took center stage. The case became a somber reminder that even in small, peaceful towns, darkness can still find its way in. But it also reminded the world of something powerful, the strength that comes when communities refuse to be broken by fear. Madison, Kaylee, Xana, Ethan. 4 bright souls, bound together by friendship, laughter, and love. Their final night on Earth was filled with ordinary joy, laughter, late-night food, and friendship. And though their time was cut short, their story reminds us of how fragile life is, and how deeply one community can unite in the face of unspeakable loss. The case of the Idaho 4 continues to unfold, and with it, the pursuit of truth and justice. For the families, for the friends, and for every person who has followed their story, this isn't just a headline. It's a reminder to hold on to those you love, to cherish every moment, and to never take safety for granted.
If this story moved you, help us share it with more people. Click subscribe and join us for more true stories, real events, and untold cases that shaped our world. Because every story deserves to be remembered.